Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss whether we are witnessing a shift in India-Sri Lanka relations. After having voted against Sri Lanka on the issue of alleged war crimes in the UN for 2 consecutive years, India abstained from voting on a similar resolution this year. The latest resolution was tougher on Sri Lanka than the previous ones. It called for an independent international investigation into the war crimes said to have been committed by the Sri Lankan armed forces against the Tamil population during the war against the LTTE, Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. India's refusal to vote against Sri Lanka seems to have sent a strong positive signal to Colombo. However, Tamil leaders in India, including those in the ruling Congress party, have expressed unhappiness over the decision publicly. We are asking today whether there is an attempt to reset India-Sri Lanka relations and what might that entail. To discuss these issues, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, a veteran diplomat. He was India's High Commissioner to Pakistan and to Australia, but more importantly for the purpose of this discussion, he was in the Rajiv Gandhi PMO in the crucial years of 1987 to 1990, and you helped in the Rajiv Jayawardene Accord of 1987. And we have Professor P. Sahdevan. He's Professor of South Asian Studies at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. You've written books on Sri Lanka and you know the country well. And we have with us my old friend, Ambassador Hardeep Puri. He was India's permanent representative in the UN, was India's High Commissioner in Sri Lanka, and has the distinction of having negotiated with Prabhakaran for 17 long hours, cumulatively. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Mr. Parthasarathy, let me begin with you.
Yeah.
If you take Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's absence from Chogam in 2013, and this year's refusal by India to vote on the resolution against Sri Lanka, it would seem that India has been oscillating between balancing domestic interests with its geostrategic interests in Sri Lanka. Yes. How difficult is this balancing act?
I think we have done this balancing act for a pretty long time from the 1980s. It depends on how politically adept you were. I think the Prime Minister made a mistake of not going to Colombo. He should have first gone to Jaffna, met the Chief Minister, and then gone to Colombo. But that is water under the
bridge. There was such a proposal.
There was such a proposal. Why he did not accept it is beyond me. Because then he would have been looking after Tamil interests first. Look, I think what has really happened is this resolution has gone beyond what was passed earlier. And in this particular case, and in the past, the Americans listened to us on what was acceptable. This time they went on their own.
Okay.
The second point, and this is more important, we have a massive aid program to Sri Lanka. 80,000 crores, $1.8 billion is its value, unprecedented. You cannot implement that without Sri Lankan cooperation. You cannot get the Sri Lankan government to fully implement in letter and spirit the 13th Amendment unless you work with others and have the leverage to do so.
Yeah.
Right now, one more last point. Not a single Asian country except South Korea voted for this. Even South Africa, the country which supports reconciliation, felt that reconciliation has to be an internal affair. It can't be imposed.
We're going to discuss that in greater detail. Professor Sahdevan, in 2012 and 2013, India voted for the US-sponsored resolution but got it watered down in the hope that Colombo will appreciate India's role in watering down the resolution. But Colombo was upset that you voted along with the US, and the Tamils of Tamil Nadu, they were upset that, instead of making the resolution tougher, you made it weaker. So what foreign policy or domestic objectives were served by India's previous 2 votes of 2012 and 2013?
Oh, I think it sent a message, I think, that we are deeply interested in the developments. You cannot really ignore us. The second thing is now, I think that's what you can ask the same question in the present context. Whether is it going to serve any interest that we really sort of, keenly want to promote. I'm not sure really. The point is, you may have sent a signal that I think that we are still available for re-engagement, resetting the relationship. But certain things are to be really in order there. That I think we need to really, our concerns and worries are to be really taken care of or addressed in a way. I mean, our concerns are mostly in terms of, the growing Chinese deepening interest in Sri Lanka.
I'm going to come to that. But you're saying that even abstaining is not going to promote Indian
interests. It's
interests.
not going to really. I think it's the euphoria lasted only for 2 days because Rajapaksa released 80 odd fishermen. Now,
And next day, Sri Lankan Navy offered sweets and soft drinks
and
to
third day they
Indian
really,
fishermen.
they hit at the fellows in beyond Kachativi in a way. So I'm not really sure that it's really going to take India far.
No, I'm going to come to this.
Yeah,
Let me go to Hardeep. Hardeep, you recently written an article on this issue. Now, on 27th January this year, the Northern Provincial Council of Sri Lanka passed a resolution calling for an international investigation into alleged war crimes committed during the armed conflict with LTTE. But you, in your article, say that the UN resolution only reflected what you call the propaganda of the international human rights industry. What does this term mean in any case?
Well, first of all, that's one of the things I said in the article, Bharat. But let me say, countries vote not in favor or against each other or abstain. They vote on the content of resolutions. I think that's the most important thing to remember. There is no inconsistency, in my view, between our votes in 2012 and 2013 and the vote a few days ago. Why? Because there is, at the end of the day, a very delicate balance between external stimulus in a human rights situation and domestic machinery which has to address and remedy the situation. Now, in this case, it is not a human rights situation. The issue here is one of mass atrocities. It is of war crimes. And the resolution doesn't talk about war crimes committed by the armed forces of the state. It also talks about atrocities committed by the LTTE. That is the issue. And my submission here is that this resolution in March went way beyond the earlier two resolutions because it supplants the domestic machinery. It's an absolutely aggressive international instrument which is going to be inquiring. In all likelihood, the domestic machinery and the Sri Lankan state will not cooperate. I mean, that is my expectation. So you have a situation where the international human rights industry, which I referred to, which is always intrusive at the best of times and aggressive, I think has won the day. For us, it tipped the balance away from a balancing of the two and went in the other direction. And the Mandarins and South Bloc have always been uneasy because our position is one of what I would call responsible sovereignty, not absolute sovereignty. And responsible sovereignty means, now in the case of the Northern Provincial Council's resolution, my own sense is that you will not get closure till the actions on both sides in the last 100 days of the military campaign against the LTT, which was May 2009, unless there is some kind of a truth and reconciliation committee. You need to find out also about the atrocities committed by the LTTE against innocent civilians. First, there was a fratricidal war. They knocked off all the other groups, EPRLF, Plot, etc. But at the end of the day, they killed a lot of innocent civilians. So I think that resolution deals with this kind of a situation. And truth and reconciliation is a must. If we don't get that, it's going to fester.
Reconciliation, not retribution.
Yeah, we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing attempts to reset India-Sri Lanka relations. Partha, do you think India's decision to abstain this time on the UN resolution had to do with the reduced stakes of the Congress party, which leads the UPA in Tamil Nadu? The DMK has already withdrawn support, and the party has virtually no electoral chances in the state. So it was a safe decision to take.
No, I would think not. I would, in fairness, give them credit for looking at larger national interests. And I would say this, that our larger national interests, as I said, are served by implementation of the 13th Amendment, the withdrawal of the armed forces from the north, so that people can go about life, and thirdly, by the economic empowerment which we are seeking. And I think we should concentrate on that. How best we can achieve that is not by what the Americans say, because those guys have not put a cent of money in this. They don't put their money where their mouth is.
Okay. Professor Sahadevan, doesn't India's abstention legitimize Colombo's continuing aggression against those Sri Lankan citizens who are arguing for accountability, those who want an end to impunity for human rights violations throughout the country. Because even now, enforced abductions are taking place. 2 human rights activists were recently picked up. Doesn't Sri Lankan state get emboldened to continue doing these things?
Frankly speaking, that's what my fear too, because you are really dealing with the hard-headed regime, sort of got intoxicated by the victory in the war, promoting majoritarian nationalism and all that. What you said can be really easily interpreted by the Sri Lankan Tamil community. I mean, not just in Sri Lanka, but elsewhere too. A section in Tamil Nadu may also do the same. But at the end of the day, that when you don't really find certain responsible or reasonable responses from the other side, I think that what you are even do in a very positive sense may be interpreted differently there. But that's a worry in a way.
Okay. Hardeep, do you think in 2012, 2013, India went along, even if with the watered down resolutions in the UN Human Rights Council, because it was, there was some US pressure, because the US didn't want to see the resolutions as a purely Western project. It wanted to, the resolutions have some regional legitimacy.
No, my take sitting in New York, Bharat, was that it was not US pressure. Because, you know, there are limits to what any sponsor of a resolution can do with a country of India's size and standing. I think it was more a sense of helplessness. I think the government has been trying to use a margin of persuasion with Colombo. You know, the Tamils are your citizens, you must ensure their dignity, you must ensure their rights. But Colombo did not, this did not find resonance in Colombo. So therefore, when a resolution came, when you were getting it in Tamil Nadu, there was a lot of, all the political parties in Tamil Nadu, DMK, AIDMK, VICO, everybody was on the same page. So when we faced a situation, Colombo is not moving, Tamil Nadu is upset. What I found surprising was that instead of saying that they took a particular decision to vote in favor because they wanted justice for the Tamils, they took it, they almost announced that it did it because of Tamil Nadu pressure. So it was Tamil Nadu pressure, not US pressure. Now, this has gone beyond the red line. And therefore, as Partha says absolutely correctly, you know, we have big stakes there.
Yep.
And I'm not worried about Chinese intrusion or anybody else's intrusion. After all, this is a part of, you know, our neighborhood where we have vital stakes.
Yep.
Therefore, we have to use that margin of persuasion. Whether we can or not, I don't know.
All right. Partha, some people, some observers have argued that India's decision this time around was also aimed at sending a signal to the US and was a result of the deteriorating relationship between the US and India, the reasons for which are pretty well known. So do you think this was an attempt to signal to the US that it stands isolated in the region on when it gets aggressive about certain issues in certain
most
countries?
American publications have noted that we are on not the same page. But let me say this, Bharat. We are on the wrong, different page with the United States, not just on Colombo. The Americans are backing the Jamaat Islami in Bangladesh.
In Afghanistan.
And in Afghanistan, they're pulling off on wanting to leave their weapons behind in Pakistan. So I think with the Americans, signals have to go.
So was this a signal then?
Well, it was certainly, I think, a factor, and I think it's a good signal to send to the Americans. That, in our region, work with us. And this has happened during the Bush administration, as Hardeep would note, and more importantly, during the tenure of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. John Kerry is on his own ego trip.
Yeah. Professor Sahadevan, do you agree that you know, India being the big power in the region, others should work with India in the region? So you know, it seems fairly sort of a legitimate sort of expectation. But people say with big power also come big responsibilities. So do you think India, as a growing power, is abdicating its responsibilities about human rights in Sri Lanka, about truth and reconciliation in Sri Lanka?
That seems to be the growing sort of a feeling in a way in the region. I think that's the last 5-7 years. I think we've seen that you know, India in a way actually not withdrawing, in a way actually leaving this, you know, strategic space for others to come and fill in it up. Point is, I think you are a responsible power, you are a great power in the region and all that, you have ambitions to rise. but that you should also set the agenda in a way. I'm not saying that you must really arm twist vis-a-vis your neighbors, but there are initiatives, there are really sort of things to be done.
Okay.
You cannot really sort of say that I think let others take initiative and then I'll respond
Okay,
to
give
it.
me a quick word from you on this. Do you
Well,
agree?
this is symptomatic of policy in the last 5 years in particular, but I would say even as the professor is saying 7-8 years. There is hesitation, there's reticence. At the end of the day, you get a picture of strategic confusion. Here, I think that the signal to the Americans may be purely coincidental. I think the Tamil Nadu factor is important. I mean, they had no more stakes there. But most important, please, I think the bureaucracy finally asserted itself. And the South Block boys and girls turned around and said, hey, wait a minute. All our life we have talked about responsible sovereignty. But here is a resolution which is going to make nonsense of all this totally.
But they won when politics had already lost.
That's precisely the point. But that is the, state of nature, as we know it.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again with this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the attempt to reset India-Sri Lanka relationship. Hardeep, you've talked about responsible sovereignty and the intrusiveness of the resolution against Sri Lanka. Now, can it be seriously argued that Sri Lanka has made recognizable, constructive efforts to deal with the issue of war crimes and human rights violations?
No, they have not. That's a short answer.
So therefore, why do we say then you don't need international pressure?
No, you need international pressure, but pressure has to be calibrated. Sri Lanka is following a policy of majoritarianism. I heard the professor use that word. I agree. What you need to remind Sri Lanka is now you already have an international investigation. Whether Sri Lanka likes it or not, an investigation will take place. It was carried. And India, therefore, has to be able to utilize that opportunity to work with Sri Lanka to encourage them in order to get a closure on this.
Okay. Professor Sehdevan, Sri Lanka had the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission, LLRC. Now, most Sri Lankans believe, those who are in the human rights
Industry.
not industry,
Okay.
but in the field of human rights, they claim that there are serious concerns still about LLRC recommendations being implemented, whether it is granting of full political rights, language rights, inclusive development, compensation, withdrawal of military personnel from civilian administration in the north and the east. So, are these, as you said, this is a majoritarian mindset, where war crimes are investigated by the same army which is accused of, having committed those crimes.
True.
So, on what basis can we put any faith in Colombo to do things right, which they haven't done right up to now?
But that's the issue. That's what you said is correct in a way. I think what they've done with the LLRCs, I think what they've done is basically they've shown the symbolism in a way. They're not really gone into deeper in terms of really sort of making commitment and also showing the willpower to really implement that. Now the problem here is, I think what you rightly said, that I think that you cannot expect Rajapaksa to investigate against himself in a way. So I think it's some way, I think I agree with the Ambassador Puri. I think this is a time for us to really sort of generate some leverage. I mean, there are back channel diplomacies and, bargaining and listen, if you do this, we'll be able to really help you out. If you don't do that, please don't expect anything to do that. I think next March is not too far away. I think it's 11 months down the line. I think that Sri Lanka is going to really face a lot of the same kind of experience in Geneva. And for us to really sort of, since we have a door which is really kept open, and we must really engage some and send certain signals that don't take us for granted.
All right. So we have greater leverage now. Now, Partha, can we use this leverage to implement the 13th Amendment which you've been talking about, which was for devolution of powers to the provinces? Now, after the war with LTTE, President Mahinda Rajapaksa said, why only 13th Amendment? I will give 13th Amendment plus. Never defined what that plus was. But the way things are moving now, and how the whole matter has been given to a parliamentary select committee, where the majority is actually not in favor of devolution, people are saying that he actually wants to give 13th Amendment minus. What do you have to say to that?
Now, let me say two things. I entirely agree with the professor. I think we should use this opportunity to encourage the Sri Lankans to set up a credible, I'm stressing credible national reconciliation organization to look into this whole issue. It's national but credible. Second, I think it's important that we stress as a first step the thinning out of the army, the implementation of the 13th Amendment, and worse still, Sri Lankan bureaucrats are not listening to the Chief Minister. I think the Chief Minister's authority
northern
has to-
province.
it has to be asserted. Sri Lanka will have to ensure that and move towards 13th Amendment. And I would ultimately think the solution lies in what Professor Peris and Neelan Teruchilvam recommended
Neeru.
beyond the 13th Amendment.
Yeah, but I'm saying that. Do you think?
Well,
this can be
I
done
don't
bilaterally?
think it's good.
It's one thing to say Sri Lanka should do this and should do
Let me
that.
say this.
but-
I don't think before their elections they are going to move in a hurry. But the suggestion and pressure for a national reconciliation commission has to come, a credible one.
Yeah.
And second, I don't think you should push them publicly.
Yeah.
But privately, the pressure should be
Okay,
on.
Hardeep, you wanted to say something?
I think, Bharat, the 13th Amendment is too little too late. The Sri Lankan state is embarked on a totally different path, and now they will have to look at the international spotlight. But we must be there supporting them and encouraging them
Yeah.
to do the kinds of things that Partha is advocating.
Okay. Just to go on to a different subject slightly but related, Professor Sadevan, how important is the China factor in India-Sri Lanka relations, especially the increasing economic footprint
Yeah.
of China? If you just look at the kind of projects they are in, Hambantota Port, Katunaike Colombo Expressway, Norochalai Coal Power Project, Mathala Airport, Colombo South Harbour Expansion Project, 661-room Shangri-La Hotel, Centre for Performing Arts in Colombo, all told, the infrastructure investment is over $6 billion US, more than any other country.
True.
So, how important is this in our
Well, I
relationship
think,
with Sri Lanka?
let's be very realistic. I don't think that we are going to match with China in terms of really giving all that they're really willing to give. But point is, I think the political leverage we can generate, economic leverage may be difficult. But I think at the same time, we should never, I mean, of course, the establishment doesn't seem to be worried, but it's a factor, it's a concern in the short term or long term. But I think we must really sort of maximize our leverages. You generate leverages and do exercise, and without which you don't really have a leverage at all. The fact is, I think you don't really underestimate your capacity. At the end of the day, Sri Lanka requires India's wholehearted support for the survival as an independent sovereign state. Chinese won't really come and really do that.
You want to say
I
something on
think
this?
I agree. We are next door. But I think we should be subtle about this. We don't believe in arm twisting and so on. But what is important is, look at our infrastructure project. The power station, 500 megawatts, the railroad to the north. Our infrastructure projects are geared towards the welfare of Tamils, Kankesenturai. So our focus is in the north. We have Trincomalee, and Colombo and Hambantota are too crowded for naval ships. I don't think the Sri Lankans are foolish enough to, rush into Chinese arms.
I talked of economic footprint.
No,
I didn't talk of string of pearls or encirclement.
I think in the case, let us face it, let us set our economy
Yeah.
and house in order. Look at the mess we've made in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Only then can we
All right.
compete with the Chinese.
Okay, no, last word to you, but what I want you to do at the end of this discussion really is tell us what are our strategic interests in Sri Lanka and what are our degrees of freedom given the challenge from the Chinese.
Well, first of all, I don't look at the within quote challenge from the Chinese. You can't give the Chinese, you can give them credit if you like for our own incompetence in project conception and execution. But I think at the end of the day, the Sri Lankans know and we know that we have to live together. And therefore, there is a much larger strategic interest which is not measured in terms of size of projects and execution. I mean, we are umbilically tied, both the Sinhala Buddhists and the Tamil Hindus or the Tamil Muslims. Look, Sri Lanka will not be able to prosper as a nation, and we will not be able to move ahead unless the Sri Lankans and us are on within that same convergence band. So for me, the strategic interest is of a much higher order. Okay. And if we work together, let Sri Lanka get Chinese investment, let them get our investment. At the end of the day, you can't change the orientation. Yeah. But the majoritarian focus and approach has to change. Tamils have to be given their minority rights and to be able to live there with dignity. And that is very important for us in the state of Tamil Nadu.
Okay, so that's very well put. Thank you very much for summarizing India's national interests in such a graphic manner. I thank all of you for having come here and analyzed the situation for our viewers. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.